On February the 28th, the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury, 3 weapon systems were used in combat for the very first time in history. Not tested, not demonstrated, used, against real targets, with real results. The United States military had been developing each of them for years, in some cases over a decade, and Iran became the live proving ground. CENTCOM confirmed all 3 publicly. What it did not explain, and what nobody has yet assembled in a single analysis, is why these 3 specific weapons were chosen for their combat debut in this specific conflict, what each of them tells China and Russia about American strike capability, and what the fact that Iran was largely unable to intercept any of them means for the future of warfare in the most contested region on the planet. That is what this video is going to do. The first weapon is the precision strike missile, known as the PrSM, manufactured by Lockheed Martin and fired from the M142 high-mobility artillery rocket system, the HIMARS launcher that became famous in Ukraine. CENTCOM confirmed its combat debut on March the 5th in a post on X that included footage of PrSM launches from HIMARS units positioned somewhere in the desert. Admiral Brad Cooper, CENTCOM commander, said he could not be prouder of the men and women in uniform leveraging innovation to create dilemmas for the enemy. Patricia Bazalczyk, Associate Director at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Missile Defense Project, told Business Insider the debut signals the beginning of a new chapter of Army strike capability, with significantly greater reach and accuracy. Neither of them mentioned what makes the PrSM's timing in Iran specifically significant. So let us start there. The PrSM exists because Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019. That treaty, co-signed with the Soviet Union in 1987, capped ground-launched missile ranges at 500 kilometers. Lockheed Martin had originally designed the PrSM to replace the MGM-140 Army Tactical Missile System, the ATACMS, within that cap. The moment the INF treaty was gone, the ceiling was lifted. Tom Carrico, director of the Missile Defense Project at CSIS, described what happened next with a phrase that cuts through the technical language entirely. He said, "Now that we are out of the INF treaty, we are going to pump these out like sausages." The PrSM Increment 1 currently in service has a confirmed range exceeding 480 kilometers, already comfortably beyond the old treaty limit. But the development roadmap goes significantly further. Increment 2, designated the land-based anti-ship missile, adds a multi-mode seeker for engaging moving targets including ships, with a range approaching 1,000 kilometers. Increment 4 is designed to exceed 1,000 kilometers. Increment 5 will fire from an autonomous launcher with no human crew required at the launch site. What Iran experienced in the opening salvos of Epic Fury was Increment 1, the baseline, the version that is being pumped out like sausages. The most important thing about the PrSM in this conflict is not what it did to Iran, it is what it demonstrates to China. The missile was specifically designed for the Indo-Pacific theater, where the geography of island chains limits land-based launch positions and conventional ATACMS ranges were insufficient to cover the distances required. Every Chinese military planner watching Operation Epic Fury just watched the United States successfully deploy a ground-launched precision ballistic missile at combat scale for the first time. The range demonstration over Iran is a direct message to Beijing about Taiwan. But the second weapon is where the story gets genuinely strange, and this is the part nobody expected. Stay with me. CENTCOM announced on February the 28th that Task Force Scorpion Strike conducted the first combat use in history of the low-cost, uncrewed combat attack system, the LUCAS drone, designed by U.S. defense contractor SpectreWorks, unit cost approximately $35,000. And the reason the LUCAS drone exists at all is Iran. At some point in the early 2020s, according to U.S. officials, American forces captured an Iranian Shahed drone intact. SpectreWorks engineers studied it, reverse-engineered key elements of the design, and built an American version. The Delta Wing pusher propeller airframe, the autonomous navigation architecture, the one-way attack concept, all of it derived from the weapon Iran had spent decades developing and that Russia had used to devastating effect across Ukraine. The LUCAS is Iran's own technology turned back on Iran. CENTCOM said it plainly in their announcement. These low-cost drones, modeled after Iran's Shahed drones, are now delivering American-made retribution. The strategic logic behind LUCAS goes beyond the irony. It addresses a genuine vulnerability that a U.S. defense official acknowledged to CNN with unusual candor. He said the American military had historically focused on larger and more expensive military systems, which could have put U.S. forces at a disadvantage against cheaper, simpler systems like Iran's kamikaze Shaheds. A Shahed costs approximately $20,000. A Patriot interceptor missile costs around $4 million. Iran had been exploiting that cost asymmetry for years, forcing the United States and its allies to spend hundreds of times more money defending against cheap drones than Iran spent producing them. The Lucas at $35,000 per unit does not solve that asymmetry entirely, but it changes the equation. It gives U.S. forces a mass-producible, expendable strike system that can saturate enemy radar, probe air defenses, and strike targets that do not justify a $1 million cruise missile. Army Recognition reported that CENTCOM officials described having an amount that provides a significant level of capability, while indicating that more units are continuously being produced and deployed. The Lucas also has a capability the original Shahed lacks. Open-source analysts examining released images identified nose-mounted gimbaled camera systems and satellite connectivity modules on the Lucas airframe. Satellite connectivity means Lucas operators can retask their drones mid-flight, updating target data or destination coordinates in response to changes on the ground. The original Shahed flies a preset course and cannot be redirected after launch. The Lucas can be. That difference between a fire and forget system and a redirectable autonomous strike drone is operationally significant. It means the United States is not just copying Iran's concept. It is building a more sophisticated version of it and deploying it at scale. Now here is the third weapon. And this one is the most quietly significant of the three for a reason that took analysts several days to identify. Stay with me because the detail is in the paint. The Tomahawk cruise missile has been in the American arsenal since 1983. It is not a new weapon. 14 or more guided missile destroyers fired Tomahawk Block 4 and 5 variants at Iranian targets from the Gulf and Arabian Sea throughout the operation. But in the opening hours of Epic Fury, footage and imagery from CENTCOM showed something that had never been seen before. A Tomahawk painted glossy black, not the standard hazy gray that every variant of this missile has carried for over 4 decades. Flat, radar-absorbent black. Defense Update's reporting confirmed this was a new variant, and open-source intelligence analysts quickly identified why the color matters. The same black coating had previously been observed on the AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missile, the LRASM, where it functions as a low-observable treatment combining radar-absorbent materials with infrared suppressive properties. Applied to a Tomahawk, it makes the missile significantly harder to detect in its terminal phase, particularly over water where standard gray missiles provide a visible contrast that radar and optical systems can track. The traditional gray Tomahawk is already extremely difficult to intercept. Iranian air defense systems had essentially no meaningful capability against it before. The Black Tomahawk makes the detection window even narrower. Iran almost certainly did not see most of them coming. Defense Update confirmed the Black Tomahawk was deployed in the initial salvos specifically against Iranian air defense infrastructure and naval targets near the Strait of Hormuz. The sequence was deliberate. Destroy the radar and missile defense network first with a weapon those defenses cannot reliably detect. Then send everything else through the gap. The combination of these three systems in the opening hours of Epic Fury was not coincidental. It was a layered doctrine. The Black Tomahawk struck radar sites and coastal defense infrastructure in the dark before Iran's command and control could coordinate a response. Lucas drones saturated air defense coverage zones, forcing Iranian interceptor systems to expend missiles on $35,000 targets and exposing the location and density of those defense assets in real time. And PrSM missiles fired from HIMARS units across the Gulf hit time-sensitive targets, including missile launchers and command nodes, with a speed and range that gave Iranian forces essentially no reaction window. The three systems were designed to work together even if they had never previously been tested together in combat. Iran became the test. Here is what the expectations were before Operation Epic Fury, and what the reality of the past 24 days has demonstrated. The expectation was that the ATACMS was the U.S. Army's primary ground-launched precision strike capability in the region. The reality is that the PrSM has now had its combat debut at greater range with a smaller radar cross-section, and the development pipeline behind it extends to ranges that make every military planner in Beijing and Moscow recalculate their defensive coverage. The expectation was that Iran's years of drone development gave it an asymmetric advantage in low-cost mass strike capability. The reality is that the United States studied Iran's own technology, reverse-engineered it, improved it, and used it against Iran on the first day of the conflict. The expectation was that the Tomahawk, a weapon that has been in service for over 4 decades, was a known quantity with a predictable detectability profile that sophisticated air defense systems could plan against. The reality is that a new variant with low-observable coating was deployed in combat before any adversary had characterized its radar signature or developed intercept protocols for it. The expectation was that these 3 systems would be debuted gradually in lower-intensity conflicts to evaluate performance. The reality is that the United States chose one of the most heavily defended countries in the Middle East as the proving ground, under live combat conditions, against a real integrated air defense system, and all 3 performed well enough that CENTCOM published confirmation of each debut within days. China and Russia were watching every one of those confirmations. The press releases were not just for domestic consumption. They were a demonstration, not of what the United States did to Iran, of what the United States could do to anyone. Drop your assessment in the comments. Which of these 3 weapons do you think changes the global military balance the most? This is Global Conflicts Dispatch. Subscribe. Back tomorrow.